You know, I was an actor in a former life, so I was a cater waiter in New York, and then I started cooking in a kitchen in New York City with a caterer who did like swanky parties on Fifth Avenue, and that was
fun.
That was what, yeah, it was fun, yeah. But it also that's what made me want to go into it as a career. And when Gail and I, when we met, after we met, like a year after we'd actually met, we were talking about our jobs in New York City, and it turned out that we had both worked at the same restaurant at the same time.
We worked together.
She was back of house, I was front of house. So yeah, we worked together.
In the 80s.
Cool. Wait, 80s?
1985. Dan was the host.
It was not as long ago as you think, Ruby.
And I was the line cook there.
I had great hair.
I was going to say, I think I probably had like spiked hair.
Yeah.
And we wore magenta wigs on the line. It was an open kitchen.
Did you really?
Oh,
wigs?
yeah.
Literally wigs?
We wore magenta and cyan colored wigs and red lipstick we put on before service every night.
So hot on the line.
It's always hot on the line.
But wearing a wig must have been
really
hellish.
hot on the line.
Sweating.
So my first cooking job, I was a waitress. I was a starving art student in college, and I started waitressing at this vegetarian restaurant, and one day the typical thing happened, which is a line cook did a no-show, no-call, which is, like in our business, you don't call in sick, you call in dead.
Right.
You know, you just don't show up if you're not showing.
Or in jail. You call in jail.
Yeah, you call
That's
up for bond.
Like the teacher.
So they looked at me and they said, Gail, can you cook? And I said, no, I can't cook. I'm from the North Shore of Chicago. You know, we make reservations. And my manager threw an apron at me and she said, you can cook now, get in the kitchen. And I was completely terrified for about 7 seconds. And second number 8, and I get choked up every time I talk about it, I felt like I had found my home, like a calling. Like I was speaking a language that I didn't even know I was fluent in, but I knew it all. And looking back, I try to figure out what that was. I could make the mushroom casserole with, sage and blah, blah, blah. But I think it was sort of the waitress in me knew all the recipes, knew how to describe every dish, knew what had sesame oil and what was sauteed. And the waitress in me was speaking to this cook in me. But everything came out. And I was so joyful to have this experience with these live ingredients and nurturing people and creating, and the pace of it, it's very exciting in a kitchen. And I remember running home that night and calling my dad and saying, guess what, Dad? My dad's a musician, so he's an artist of types. I said, I know what I want to do. I know what I want to be. I want to be a chef. And my dad says, well, Gay, I guess everybody's got to eat. So that was the sort of unsupportive response to like me finding my calling, But I kept with it. And actually my dad was right. Everybody does have to eat. And it turns out that it is something that unites everybody. Yes, music is nice. You don't need it every day, but if you don't eat, you will not survive. So
literally,
it's something I love being able to do and share with other people because it's essential to survival.
Well, my very first food job was in Burger King at minimum wage. I was in charge of...
You didn't tell me that.
I was in charge of chopping the ice out of the freezer, and I was...
Of course!
I was 15.
Chopping.
I was 15, and I was excellent. The freezer was perfect at the end of my shift. But then in New York, I think that this was probably the beginning of my professional job. I was running events working for a catering company. I was working as a waiter forever, but I think what began our career right now is Dan and I's, the catering company we have. He was working, as he said, in a kitchen, and I was working front of house separately, running events at the Lincoln Center and the Metropolitan Opera and the UN. So I was running events. So when we came to Chicago, it was very simple for us to hang up the Hearty Boys sign and say, we're catering for you and your wedding in this kind of like East Coast kind of funky way that wasn't being done in Chicago at that point. And when we brought that here, it was just a real comfort level to it.